Krishna, dear devotees, and welcome to today's session. How are you doing? I pray that all is well with you and your families at this time. So today we're on day number 7 of the Kartik Month Special, where we're discussing the beautiful Leela of Mother Yashoda binding baby Krishna. And we're on text number 6 today. And it's a beautiful unfolding of the pastime, which is in the Damodar Astikam. But we're gradually going through it step by step in more detail and bringing out and revealing the deep intimacy between Krishna and his pure devotee, Mother Yashoda. So we move on today to text number 6, and it's as follows. Sanjata kopaha spurita rannadharam sandhasya dadbir dadimanta bhajanam bitva mirsasrur drasid asmanaraho jaghasyahayan gavan antaram gataha. Translation: being very angry and biting his reddish lips with his teeth. So we catching the Leela when Krishna is so hurt. Yesterday we were having fun and having a court case to see whether Mother Yashoda was justified in what she has done by going to take the milk off the stove instead of feeding baby Krishna. And we can see that this has created a lot of, in terms of the Leela, of course in terms of pastime, this is all ecstasy for Krishna. Whether it's anger or whether it's love or whether it's affection, it's all ecstasy for Krishna. Krishna is the absolute truth. Param Satyam Dhimahi. So everything exists within him in completeness. So to experience all of that is natural for him. So we see in terms of the Leela, he got very, very upset. And now he's hurt and he's angry. And we see the reaction of this. So what Mother Yashoda has done has stopped him from feeding, put him down, and gone to the kitchen. And you know, in Vedic culture, usually the kitchen is like the last room on the outer parts of the house. So it's definitely in another room. So she put him down and then she goes to the kitchen. So she doesn't know what's happening here now in the room. And she goes and takes the milk off the stove and, you know, probably puts the fire, the chula. Chula in Vedic culture, it's called chula, a little oven that they cook in. It's a clay oven. And she must have taken the milk off the stove, and she must have, secured it and make sure that the fire is out. So that may have taken a minute or two. And then she comes back. But in that meantime, Krishna is so angry. He is so angry. It's described here. Let's see. It's described here, being very angry and biting his reddish lips with his teeth. So we know in Damodar Astikam, Krishna's lips are described as a bimba red fruit. Bimba red lips. Krishna has this bimba fruit lips, very reddish lips. And as a child, he would have been even more attractive. No lipstick required. No lipstick required. This is natural reddish lips. And Satyavati Muni is looking at this and is appreciating the beauty of this childhood, Rupa Madhuryam, this childhood form of Krishna. But not only that, it's not only the beauty of the features, he is also now exhibiting anger. And we see when he's angry now, he starts to bite his lips in anger, Mother, how could you leave me like this? So he's so angry. I remember one Prabhupada disciple was saying once, when Prabhupada would get angry, it would be like a thunderstorm. His lips would quiver. His lips would quiver. You know, it will. I can't even make those faces because it's not natural for me. But in that state, Prabhupada would be so angry that his lips would quiver. And that alone would, the disciple, whatever he has done, he just say, oof, I'll never do this again. So we can see here that it seems to be a trait of the Vrindavan Basis following Krishna, that when they get really, really angry or disturbed, then they bite the lips with anger. So this is what Krishna has done here. And the translation goes on. Krishna, with false tears in his eyes, broke the container of yogurt with a piece of stone. So we know in other religious traditions, one of the main reasons that people follow religion is because they fear the wrath of God. They fear God's anger because punishment will come from that. But here the pure devotee is bringing out anger within the Lord, but it's an embellishment. It's a bhushana. It's an ornament on Krishna, and it's an ornament on Mother Yashoda in this very deep, intense relationship. Remember, there is no punishment now. You're already in the spiritual world. But she's bringing out that deep, intimate emotions that God also experienced. Remember, we're speaking of the absolute truth here. And I think before we start with the Leela, Damodar Astikam starts that way. Namam Ishwaram. That I know you are a Ishwara. I know you're the Supreme Lord. Namam Ishwaram Satchidananda Rupam. And I know you have a transcendental form. But in terms of this pastime, what is unfolding here is totally mesmerizing, enchanting me. So I'm not confused about your position. I know you, Param Satyam Dhimai, you are the Supreme Lord. Ishwara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. So he is aware that this is the Supreme Lord. Namam Ishwaram. I'm offering obeisance to you, Supreme Lord. But now when you behaving and interacting with your pure devotee, you're not the Supreme anymore. Nothing about Krishna is supreme there except love. Nothing about Krishna is valid there in terms of God except prema, love. So this is what happens to Krishna. He's bound by his mother's pure love. He's not bound by any laws that he created. He's not bound by any powers that he has. He's powerless there. In front of his pure devotee, he's totally powerless. None of those powers work there. They work in the material world very well. But in front of the pure devotee, he becomes helpless. We see that even in the Madhurya Ras, when the gopis ran away, when Krishna disappeared, so the gopis were running and looking for him. And Lord Narayan appeared in four-armed form there. Actually it was Krishna, but he appeared in four-handed form. And in front of Radharani, two hands disappeared. He couldn't hold that form because her love was too intense and he couldn't hold that form. So in the material world, he's the big boss here. But in front of love, Krishna becomes helpless. Krishna becomes totally helpless because the love of the pure devotee is so pure, so intense that he just cannot repay that. Na parihatam. He just cannot repay or exchange that level of intensity of love. So when we are observing the Leela, we are observing it from the human perspective, that is, this is just a child. But in terms of Krishna, this is a very deep, intense experience for him. You can see the way he's reacting, biting his lips, and very angry. Even Nrsingadev won't even manage here in front of Mother Yashoda. We know in terms of the Nrsingadev Leela, even Lakshmi couldn't go close. That anger was so intense. And here the source of all sources of anger is in front of Mother Yashoda, and he's exhibiting and he is helpless in that presence of intense love. Just see how pure and pristine that love is of Golok Vrindavan, the love of the Brajbasis. That in Narsingha Leela, even Lakshmi couldn't approach Narasimhadev in the 7th canto when that form of anger came. But here in the Golok Vrindavan, the exchange between Mother Yashoda and Krishna is totally on another level. So we see in the Damodar Astikam, in the 3rd verse, it describes Iti Driksalila Virananda Kunde Swago Samnimam Jantam Makya Payantam Tadiye Sitadyesu Bhaktir Sitatvam Puna Prematastam Satam Iti Vande. So we see Satyavrati Muni is praying. He's saying, I'm offering hundreds and hundreds of times I offer my obeisances to this, my Lord. Because I'm always assessing in terms of power. I'm always assessing you in terms of your power in the material world. But here I'm seeing a whole different experience of you and your intimate, pure devotee. So it's describing that by such childhood pastimes like this, you are drowning the inhabitants of Gokul in pools of ecstasy. The experience of this pastimes is so intense that by observing it, you can't experience it. You just by observing it looks childlike Leela. But what the Lord is experiencing and what the observer gets bewildered by is the way Krishna reacts so realistically childlike. He's experiencing fear, he's experiencing anger. What can make the Lord experience that in such an intense way? It's only pure love that can do that. That's why when Satyavati Muni is assessing this, he's appreciating the depth that somebody must be very deeply connected to Krishna to bring out these emotions in him in such a deep way. So he's appreciating the loving relationship between Krishna and Mother Yashoda. That's why this Damodar Astikam verse says, for those who are absorbed in knowledge of his opulence and his majesty, you can't understand this Leela. You can't understand because you're coming in with a mental faculty, with a jnani faculty, mood. You can't understand prema by jnana. It's not going to work that way. You have to serve in the Leela. You have to get the association of a prema bhakta, a pure devotee. Then you can appreciate this Leela. So that's happening to Satyavati Muni now due to the mercy of Narada Muni. And he goes on to say that he's conquered by the pure love of his devotee, which is imbued with intimacy. So this beautiful verse of the Damodar Astikam really brings out this inner mood that's required to appreciate Krishna's pastime and the Damodar Leela. So it's described in this translation that Krishna broke the pot by throwing a stone. So in India, everything is usually stored in clay pots. It's called madka pots, and it has a dual purpose because you can cook in that. Like for Lord Jagannath, they only cook in clay pots for Jagannath, so it's pure and it's disposable after that. Biodegradable. And secondly, in summer, whatever is kept in the pot stays cool. So we also use it for water to keep, because there's no fridges. You must know at that time there's no fridge. Krishna is saying, right? Na sad bhashase suryo, na sasanko, na papaka, yat katvam na nivartante, tattamam paramam mama. That abode of mine, there is no electricity there. So he already gave warning there in the 15th chapter when we were doing Purushottam Leela, when we were doing Purushottam Month. Already the warning was given. You come there, Golok, no ISKCON problems. No electricity. So how do they keep things cool? And so they use madka pot. So it's a clay pot. And if it's full of butter or yogurt, it becomes very dense. So when you throw a stone, even as a child, Krishna threw a stone, when it hits the pot, it cracks it immediately. This pot that was broken must have been a clay pot. And that's why we can appreciate that Krishna says in 2.14, right? Bhagavad Gita, Matra Sparsa tu Kaunteya Sitoshana Sukha Dukada Agama Payano Anityastam Statik Svabharata. That in this, Arjun, be tolerant of externally hot and cold, internally sukh and dukh, happiness and distress. So he's already gave the warning. First instruction he gave Arjuna there. Be equipoised in hot and cold. And we know in the holy dhams it gets very hot and it gets very cold. So if you want to stay in Vrindavan, if you want to stay in Mayapur, both are non-different. If you want to stay, you have to be tolerant of hot and cold. Here in Mayapur at the moment it's quite cold. Cold is coming in now gradually. So we're just waiting for that experience because it's been so hot, so humid, so much of rain. So in Vrindavan, Mother Yashoda would have kept the butter in these madka pots, and it stays fresh that way. It stays clean and pure. It doesn't go bad. When we are assessing the emotions of the Lord, we see Krishna in Gita is also warned against anger. But here he's showing anger. In Gita he says, 3.37, he says there, Kama esa krodha esa rajaguna samudbhava mahasana mahapapma vidinam ihi vairinam. He says this is mahasana mahapap. It's the great sin. These three, krodh, anger, lust and greed. So he says they lead to hell. He says twice actually. Even in the 16th chapter he brings this point up again. In 16:21 he brings this point up again, that these three things, be careful of it. Now we see he's exhibiting the same thing. So in the conditioned material state, anger leads you to hell. That's Krishna's advice. Be careful. Mahapap, it's a great sin. But in the spiritual world, that anger is an embellishment. It's a bhushana. It's an ornament. Because it only comes out there, everything is pure there. So it only comes out through the intense love of his devotee. So just see in the material world and the spiritual world the difference. So he goes on to say, then he entered a room and began to eat the freshly churned butter in a solitary place. So we can see this is another room now, the room that he was in, where Mother Yashoda fed him. She's gone to the kitchen and to sort out the milk and take it off the stove, and now he went into another room. He broke the pot, which is probably like in a cellar where they keep for storage. And now he's gone into another room to eat it. So he knows he did wrong, otherwise he would have stayed there. So he's not trying to hide. And to his level of experience, maybe if I go in the other room, I won't get caught, I can hide. But mother knows everything. So just look at this childlike nature he knows he did wrong now, and he's like caught in between. What's going to happen? But it's already done. What am I going to do? You can feel all of this happening in Krishna's heart at this time. So Prabhupada says in the purport, it is natural that when a child becomes angry, he can begin crying with false tears in the eyes. Yes. What we call this, crocodile tears, that the child, because that's his only defense. What else? Last resort now. You got such an intense love in front of you, Mother Yashoda's love. Last resort is Krishna is just to cry. So because mother just melts. When baby is crying and Disturbed, mother forgets everything. So he uses as a weapon. In the material world, he uses chakra, he uses club, disc, all these weapons that he uses in the material world. Nothing like that can work there. So what weapon he uses there? He uses tears as a weapon. And this conquers Mother Yashoda. Just see the weapons here, see the weapons there. When there's prema, these kind of chakra and all that can't work. So he uses tears. He uses tears as a weapon. So Prabhupada goes on to say, so Krishna did this, and biting his reddish lips with his teeth, he broke the pot with a stone, entered a room and began to eat the freshly churned butter. So we must remember that butter on its own is not actually tasty without salt. You all eat salted butter. That's why it's the best thing. Try eating unsalted butter and see what it tastes like. So this butter would have been unsalted. So Krishna is not going for taste here. He's going for prema. What is the prema in this butter? And we were discussing this, why Krishna steals. So this is a very beautiful exchange between Krishna and his pure devotee. And it's really bringing out the prema, the love that Krishna has in his heart and Mother Yashoda has in her heart. So us as sadhana bhaktas observing this, just like Satyavrata Muni, some change can happen in the heart. And we can also develop this love for Krishna in this way. So I hope you enjoyed the class today. Please join us again tomorrow. Hare Krishna.